alarms on my bridge screamed before I even understood why. My hands froze over the console. Something had appeared out of nowhere, right inside our formation, and every sensor operator around me was shouting numbers that made no sense. My name is Vera Thawson, Tactical Officer of the Coalition cruiser Ashen Wing. 10 minutes ago, we had cornered what looked like a single human scout ship near the edge of the Kasari Divide, a quiet border region no one had fought over in decades. It should have been simple. One ship, unarmed by every record we had, surrounded by 40 of ours. Now nothing about it felt simple. Commander Doran Vale stood behind me, gripping the rail with white knuckles. He had laughed an hour earlier when the order came in to intercept. He had called it an easy afternoon, a training exercise more than a mission. Humans, after all, were the galaxy's newest neighbors, still finding their footing among older, stronger powers. Everyone knew their fleets were thin, their weapons modest, their diplomacy their only real shield. That was what we believed. That belief was about to break apart in front of us. The human vessel had not moved since we surrounded it. It floated in silence, running no active shields, showing no weapons on our scans. Our translator drones had already sent the standard message, ordering it to power down and prepare for boarding. There was no response, not even a distress signal, just silence, and a strange, low vibration our instruments could not explain. I remember checking my readings twice, certain I had made an error. The gravitic field around the ship was fluctuating in a pattern I had never seen. My superior officer told me to ignore it, calling it a sensor ghost, a common glitch when unfamiliar hull materials interacted with our scanning arrays. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Then the fluctuation stopped, and everything changed. The small ship in front of us began to shimmer, like heat rising over a desert floor. At first, I thought my screen was failing. Then I realized the shimmer was not on my screen at all. It was outside my viewport, spreading across the space where the scout vessel had been floating only seconds earlier. The ship was not shrinking. It was folding away, layer by layer, revealing something enormous underneath. Commander Vale took a step back. I heard him whisper a word in his own language, one I had never heard him use before. Something between disbelief and fear. The true vessel was not a scout at all. What we had trapped, what we had surrounded so confidently, was the outer shell of a machine so large it made our 40 ships look like scattered debris. Its hull stretched far beyond our sensor range, dark and smooth, lined with rows of weapon ports that our systems could not even finish counting before the count reset itself in confusion. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence on the bridge was heavier than any alarm. I had read reports about humans before, reports that described them as sentimental, cautious, more interested in trade agreements than military strength. Our analysts had studied every treaty they signed, every border they respected, every conflict they avoided. We concluded, with total confidence, that humanity built its safety on diplomacy because it had nothing else to build it on. Nothing else. That phrase echoed strangely in my mind as I stared at the true shape of the vessel now looming over our formation. A new signal came through, calm and steady, carried in a human voice that did not sound rushed or afraid. It was the voice of a man who introduced himself as Captain Elias Bramwell, commanding officer of the vessel now known to us as the Haldan's Reach. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every word landed like a verdict. He reminded us that 8 months earlier, human representatives had formally requested that coalition patrols avoid entering the Kasari Divide without prior agreement. That request had been dismissed in our High Council chambers as an overreaction, a nervous gesture from a species still uncertain about its place among older civilizations. I remembered the meeting notes myself, remembered officers laughing at the idea that humans expected anyone to take their boundaries seriously. Captain Bramwell did not raise his voice as he spoke again. He said his people did not make requests they were unwilling to enforce. He said the silence from his ship over the last 10 minutes had not been fear, it had been patience. Commander Vale ordered an immediate retreat sequence, but retreat was no longer simple. Our formation had drifted closer during the encirclement, and half our ships were now within a range that made any sudden movement dangerous. I watched targeting locks appear across our tactical display, dozens of them, each one perfectly placed, each one calculated with a precision that suggested the coalition fleet had never actually surrounded the human ship at all. We had surrounded ourselves. Somewhere behind me, a junior officer whispered that this had to be a bluff, a display meant only to frighten us into withdrawing. I wanted to agree with him. I wanted very badly to believe that this was theater, a clever trick meant to save human lives without a single confrontation. Then one of our escort vessels, the Corvell Ridge, made the mistake of powering its weapons in response, perhaps out of panic, perhaps out of pride. I will never know which. What I do know is what happened next, and it happened without warning, without hesitation, and without a single additional word from Captain Bramwell. A narrow beam of light, precise and controlled, crossed the space between the two vessels. It did not tear through the Corvell Ridge in a chaotic burst. It struck a single section near its main power core, disabling every system in an instant. No fire, no wreckage drifting into other ships, just silence, as the Corvell Ridge went dark, still intact, still whole, but completely powerless. It was not meant to destroy, it was meant to demonstrate. I understood then, with a clarity that felt like cold water running through my chest, that the coalition had misjudged humanity in the most dangerous way possible. We had mistaken restraint for weakness. We had assumed that patience meant limitation, that diplomacy meant desperation, that quiet borders meant empty threats. Captain Bramwell spoke once more, his tone unchanged, still calm, still measured. He said his ship had the capability to disable every vessel in our formation, within minutes, without loss of life, if that became necessary. He said this was not an attack. It was a demonstration of what his people had chosen not to use, for years, out of respect for peace. He asked us to consider what kind of civilization holds such strength in silence. Commander Vale's voice shook as he gave the order to stand down. Our weapons powered off one by one across the fleet, each ship reporting compliance in quiet, careful tones. I had never heard so many proud captains sound so uncertain. As our formation began to withdraw, I watched the true scale of the Haldan's reach one last time. Its hull seemed to stretch endlessly against the starfield, patient, controlled, untouched by the encounter it had just ended without a single life lost. I thought about every diplomatic file I had read, every report describing humans as young, cautious, and unprepared for real conflict. I understood now that those reports were not lies. They were simply incomplete. Humanity had shown us exactly what it wanted us to see, for exactly as long as it served their peace. On our journey home, Commander Vale sat in silence for most of the trip. I asked him once what he thought this meant for the future of our relationship with the human systems. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. He said that for years, our people had believed humans built their safety on friendship, treaties, and goodwill, because that was the only explanation that made sense to us. Now he understood the truth. Their friendship, their treaties, and their goodwill had never been the source of their safety at all. They had simply chosen not to remind anyone what truly stood behind it. I finished my final report that night, sitting alone in my quarters, staring at the empty stretch of stars outside my window. I wrote every detail I could recall: the shimmering hull, the calm voice, the single beam that disabled an entire warship without destroying it, the silence that followed. At the end of my report, I added a single line that was not required by protocol, but one I felt needed to be said. I wrote that the galaxy had spent generations underestimating a species that never once needed to prove itself, until the moment it finally chose to. And in that one quiet demonstration near the Kasari Divide, every power among the stars learned the same lesson at once. Humanity's peace was not born from weakness. It was a gift, offered freely, for as long as no one forced them to take it back. None of us intended to test that gift again.